Bro, I've never been so relaxed at a game that my feet were so far out that I tripped the referee. I mean, it's been a bunch of rap lyrics like with stuff about that, but Meek Mill actually tripped a referee during the game. The same game Joel Embiid tripped Damian Lee, and the league upgraded it to a flagrant. So maybe it's something in the Philly water. Everybody's tripping. No?
Yes, everyone was tripping in Philly. Meek Mill was lounging. He did not seem especially aware that he was at an NBA game and that maybe other people were moving quickly around him. He was just like at his couch, putting his feet up at home.
Right.
But he obviously was apologetic to the ref. And
that's all you can do, right? All you can do is apologize and tuck your feet back. And
I was going to say no harm, no foul. At least no one was injured, so that is close enough.
Oh, there was a foul, a flagrant foul. So,
indeed.
There's a lot going on here with this analogy, but but we're not tripping. So rest assured on that.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilMU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
What is up? Thanks for joining us here on the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU works. Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, Ben Berry, Noah Levick, Danny Pommells. You know, the usual suspects. And Noah, this is one of those early parts of the season where Sixers giveth and they taketh away. It's like they give us back Joel Embiid and DeAnthony Melton. They take away Daniel House Jr. and James Harden. They give us some wins. They take back some losses. It's like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We've had 2 games since our last podcast. The Knicks, of course, come down and win. The Sixers finally beat the Phoenix Suns, who had a 6-game winning streak over them. What's your takeaway from this early part of the season here, 11 games in, and the Sixers with a little bit of this finding themselves period that we've have come to see over years past? But regardless of the team, a lot of teams go through this stage, whether it's the Warriors or the Celtics or the Heat or whoever. Everyone can't just be off to the races like the Milwaukee Bucks. But what are your takeaways here from this early part of the season?
Well, 5-6 is disappointing overall, regardless of the circumstances, and you can't just chalk all that up to bad luck and injuries. Embiid missed 3 games with the illness, which is significant, but Sixers were 4-5 before James Harden's foot tendon strain. But Joel Embiid said after that game he was enjoying the Phillies and
hilarious
how the season has started. So they are 1-0 since Joel Embiid has proclaimed that. And the one win was definitely, in my mind, their best one of the year. Phoenix did lose Chris Paul at halftime to a heel soreness injury. But regardless, that's a very talented team that expectedly made a comeback push. And I think the Sixers looked a bit shaky and antsy when their 19-point lead was in serious jeopardy, but they got bailed out to a large extent by George Niang nailing a career-high tying 7 threes. And Joel Embiid's impact, I think, yet again, it's easy to forget how vast that is. I thought defensively, maybe his best performance of the season, despite the conditioning issues that go along with missing 3 games with the flu. But you just see the way he deters drivers, the way he protects the rim, and the versatility. Obviously, drop coverage has generally been a staple for him, but got down in a stance at 1 or 2 occasions against Devin Booker and just showed that when he's on the court, the Sixers can get away with a lot more of these learning each other, communication, not yet perfect sort of mistakes that have been prevalent this season. And oh, by the way, Embiid with 33 points, 10 rebounds, and draws 16 free throws. And drawing free throws is a huge part of what he and James Harden do. They now at least have one of those guys back, and the hope is they can continue building some momentum. But you're asking about broad early season takeaways, I think one of the big ones has to be that they've yet to sustain positive momentum. So it is on them to do that as well as they can without James Harden in the lineup.
Talk about drawing attention. They're also, drawing fouls. He's also drawing attention, which creates opportunities for George Niang to hit 7 threes if guys are knocking down open shots. Sticking with this give and take away theme, we got Joel back. We lose Harden, but what is not seems to be going away is this flu bug is now proliferating through the team, and I don't know if that started with Joel. We know he was out because of the flu, but he might have contracted it from someone else. But it's a couple of coaches are sick as well. Just not the type of thing that you want to have permeating through the practice facility with the team when you're trying to build something that's much more important on the court. So just a little snake bitten here at this time with the Harden injury, with the Joel stuff, D'Anthony Melton missing time, and a key role player in Daniel House. Just not the harbinger of good news that you would hope that the Sixers would have at this point of the season. And you see some great vibes with other teams around the league. I mentioned the Bucks before, but just not the way you would want things to be here in the early going, regardless if you're winning, if you're losing, or whatever.
I think so, but again, in my mind, yes, their luck, I imagine, is worse than the average NBA team, but not by a huge margin. Like, stars do miss games here and there, and teams do have players out with non-COVID illnesses. If you scan the injury report, the Sixers are not the only team in that category. And yeah, as I said, I think it's just, okay, they've got the big fella back now, and let's actually build on some positive habits. Embiid mentioned after that game just him running the offense from the top of the key and having that freedom, I think, to scan the floor and for double teams to be costly because he can see the passes so easily from that vantage point. That's a positive, and that was something we saw be very successful for the Sixers last season. So you imagine with no James Harden, that will be a staple of the Sixers offense. And now one of the main questions is just, can they get Tyrese Maxey back on track? Obviously, Harden's absence has coincided with 2 poor shooting performances for him. And I think we've seen more hesitation just in terms of when he should attack, when he should be the guy responsible for facilitating the offense. And in the Phoenix game, to me, it was noticeable that the ball pressure bothered him. Cameron Payne is notorious for being persistent with the ball pressure. And you see just the first play of that second half, they want to make a pass into Embiid at the elbow. Maxey can't do it. And, Doc Rivers is in his ear and not happy that his young point guard is still struggling at times with striking that right middle ground between being the point guard for his team and being an attacker. But ultimately, Rivers said what Tyrese Maxey does best right now is score. They want him to lean into that. And I don't think we're yet at the point where this is a grave concern. Everyone has an off shooting night. He's still well above 40% from 3-point range. But if the idea is we're still capable of winning at a high rate without James Harden, well, Tyrese Maxey probably needs to be a significant part of that. And a huge part of his game is attacking, being aggressive, pushing the ball up the floor, and making open 3-point shots. So the Sixers will sure hope those aspects of what Maxey brings to the table return here quite soon.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that Maxey stuff up. I was going to maybe table that for later in the podcast. But since we're here now, it's interesting. You mentioned the back-to-back poor shooting nights. I think he was 4 of 18 against Phoenix. Took 29 shots against the Knicks. And that looks worse, particularly in a loss. Some reason I feel like Emmanuel Quickly, because of the Kentucky connection and them knowing, having the familiarity, there's like a chess match between those two that sometimes plays out in the Sixers' favor and sometimes doesn't. But and you mentioned Maxey as a point guard, and we all know he isn't a point guard, but he's more of a shooting guard, and what he does is fill it up. at his best, he's going to fill it up rather than, assist and run the offense and, give guys helpers and things like that. So when he's not scoring, when he's not shooting prolifically from outside, when he's not hitting the floater or, taking the ball to the rack, when he's not shooting from deep and keeping the defense honest, what are his best attributes? What does he do well that the Sixers benefit from besides like push the pace and things like that? Like, does he need to be more dynamic with his game when the scoring isn't happening? Like, is that something that he needs to continue to work on?
Yeah, I do think so. I think just the bottom line for him is usually if he touches the paint, that's a good sign. Of course, the hope
because he draws attention and then can kick to other guys.
Yeah, and usually that's a byproduct of driving past someone, and when he's doing that, he's often just flat out leaving them in the dust and being in a position where he's able to score quite easily. I think long-term, developmentally, the hope is that many of those paint touches for him result in outs to teammates and lobs to rollers and that sort of stuff. I do think we've seen encouraging signs here and there this year with Maxey's passing, hitting guys with those pocket passes on the short roll, collapsing the defense and kicking out to three-point shooters. We have seen that on occasion, but of course the idea is that he makes major strides there and becomes more well-rounded in terms of what he can do once he's beat his man off the dribble. I think the three-level scoring continues to be an important part of who he is. Don't want him leaning on the floater too much, but yeah, he has expanded that mid-range game a little bit and I think has weapons offensively. They're just not firing for him right now very well at the moment. And a big part of that also is he's not getting calls, and that's frustrating, and that wears on you when you're absorbing a lot of contact and you feel you're not drawing a favorable whistle. The Sixers coaches do their best to advocate for him, but a lot of it's just tricky decisions for Maxey where he knows factually he's being bumped, but at a certain point, you don't want to miss 3 or 4 shots a game that you're throwing up there because you think you're fouled, and the chances of a whistle actually being blown are rather low based on the evidence so far. So that's tough for a young player to figure out. And I think those growing pains tend to be more apparent when a great facilitator who draws a ton of attention like James Harden isn't sharing the floor with you. But again, I don't think it's shocking that he would have a rough patch here or there, and the shooting numbers remain excellent. So I think for Maxey, just trust in what you do, and some of this development the Sixers want to see won't happen overnight, but regardless, maintain the aggression and trust that things are going to start falling in a more favorable direction for you with the whistles, with the jump shots that might be rimming him in and out right now, et cetera.
Yeah. Hopefully he can also continue to make some strides defensively, which could help facilitate some of his offense when he's not, shooting well, getting in the passing lanes, deflections, the transition stuff. And, I was talking to one of our producers at NBC Sports Philly, and he brought up a point and we were reflecting on it. And I think it was a good thing for us to discuss the fact that, before James Harden got here, Embiid and Maxey were forced to develop a rapport that had started to grow and blossom with, the pick and roll stuff, maybe some dribble handoff stuff. And obviously being in a ball dominant guy like James Harden and trying to incorporate him in the offense kind of makes some of that dissipate. And hopefully they can get back to some of that here in this time where Harden is out. Do you think that's something that they can proliferate and grow, even though Harden's only probably going to be out a month, hopefully? Do you think that's something that in that short time frame over maybe like 10 or 15 games that they can can grow that type of rapport that they started to build from last season? Is there something that they can pick up on and carry over here into this moment here?
I think so. I mean, I just think realistically, Maxey and Embiid with that partnership are most comfortable with the short roll and the popping, and just as far as the downright hard rolling to the rim, that's most viable when James Harden is the ball handler. He's just so much more crafty at knowing how to shield off defenders, how to shift pace, how to use his body, how to throw lobs. He's well above Tyrese Maxey in all those areas, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. But with the Embiid-Maxey duo, yeah, Joel Embiid find that soft spot in the defense.
Yeah, I mean, you want to get your best players in that pick and roll to make the defense choose, and then that way maybe hopefully there's an easy layup or easy jumper.
Definitely, yeah, and especially in a stretch like this where Maxey is obviously struggling, putting him in actions with your team's best offensive player makes sense and is a way to get him in positive situations. And for Joel Embiid, I do think he's shown at times that he doesn't want Maxey fading away from the game. I go back to the opening night in Boston in the second half of that one. He just kept throwing the ball to Maxey over and over, running those DHOs, setting screens. And he's very cognizant of this guy is a special offensive talent, and we're going to need him. And I think that obviously is more true now than ever with James Harden out. So, yeah, I think the partnership can grow a bit. I think they can develop some nuances with shifting pace and figuring out exactly when the weak side might be open because Maxey, draws some help on those pick and roll drives or what have you. But, James Harden as a pick and roll playmaker is unparalleled in some ways, and the Sixers can't replace that. It has to be a group effort. And yeah, Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, the two-man game there should certainly be a major part of what the Sixers offense is now and has good potential here over the next month, I think.
We've heard sound bites from guys like PJ Tucker, Harden, talking about, the pace that Maxey plays at and wanting him to be able to navigate both the, when to slow it down, when to speed it up, and not just be, full force. I just remember reading or listening to PJ Tucker talk about how, sometimes like I'm setting an illegal screen because I can't even set it and he's already moving, to go to the basket or make a move off of the screen or what have you. When it comes to development, Maxey's development has been, really incredible to watch and a big feather in the cap of the 76ers when it comes to where he was drafted, the contribution he's making, the growth he's taking year to year is just obviously, taking the city by storm because so many people are, enjoy to watch him play and are cheering for him. And I think the organization has been chided a lot for their lack of development in some areas, guys they let get away who they may have developed but not quite found a role for. Christian Wood comes to mind, Jeremy Grant, other guys who might be slipping my mind who are on the tip of your tongue probably. But Paul Reed suddenly is a guy that's in this mold of a guy who's kind of homegrown. He's showing promise. Obviously, playoff opportunities last year. We're seeing him here in the Suns game as the only real big off the bench. And he continues to show growth and opportunity. Do you feel like the Sixers are finding the right opportunities for Reed, or would you like to see more opportunity from him? And are you intrigued about how they continue to grow him in his future? Because I, like I said, have seen so many other guys who haven't gotten the opportunity along with the development, or either had opportunity but not enough development or what have you. So I'm curious at his progression as he continues to force them to play him because of so many great things that he can do. We can talk about that Knicks game where he had the blocks and the steals. But what are you seeing from his development, and are you leery at all, or do you look at it the same way as like the players that they develop and who's worked out and who hasn't?
I think it's case by case to some extent. Obviously, different regimes, and Doc Rivers is the one making the key decisions here. So,
yeah, I know they all can't be the Toronto Raptors, right? But I just want them to get it right with him. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, thus far, the outcome is quite good for a guy in the late 50s. But absolutely, you want Reed to keep building on the tools he has, and ideally to become, I think, an every night player. He looks quite capable of that and being a unique rotation guy for your team. But it was funny after the win over the Suns, give you a little insight into Tyrese Maxey's positivity. He decided to grab a mic and start off the locker room interview session with Paul Reed. So we all, a few of us were huddled around there in the locker room, and Tyrese Maxey got things kicked off. And yeah, ask some smart questions. He definitely has a future in broadcasting, which he might end up pursuing many years down the line. But with Paul Reed, it was clearly a warranted opportunity. He got 6 steals in 18 minutes against the Knicks, and that didn't feel like a flattering number. I think he legitimately seemed to have an impact defensively on every single play, and just has great instincts, great activity, great hands. And you go back to last season, among big man, he's in the 100th percentile for steal percentage per cleaning the glass. He's in the 85th percentile for block percentage. And this team, since Ben Simmons has left, has been middle of the pack with forcing turnovers. Minutes for Paul Reed is one clear avenue to improve on that front. And we talked about it, I think, heading into the season, but you compare him to Montrezl Harrell, and you're so much more flexible defensively with your scheme. Reed, I think, has shown he's adept at blitzing. He can hold his own against the DeAndre Aytons of the world, just in terms of improved physical strength. And he can switch quite adequately, and I think enjoys those challenges when he gets drawn onto a Devin Booker and needs to try to hold up okay in that situation. So definitely, yeah, the last couple of games for Reed, thumbs up. Doc Rivers agreed. He called his performance spectacular against Phoenix. And it's a little wait and see, because there's understandable skepticism about, will Rivers continue handing him opportunities? Will Reed indeed get occasional minutes at the 4, as Rivers has now teased a couple of times? So those are unanswered, important questions, but Paul Reed just doesn't look like a player who deserves to be spending multiple games in a row on your bench. Right. Seems like there should 100% be opportunities to get him in there, whether that's at the 5 or at the 4. And that oftentimes when he's in, though there will be negative plays that everyone notices, there's going to be a lot of positive stuff with providing the Sixers something that they really lack in terms of defensive versatility behind Joel Embiid, and in terms of just forcing turnovers at an absolutely elite level.
And I think that's easy for the fans to see, that he deserves to be in the rotation. So I think that, that often leads to why, people are critical of Doc Rivers, because the eye test tells them that he deserves to be out there. And I think Philadelphia fans specifically take it to heart when they feel like their intelligence is being insulted when it comes to, who is playing well or who's hot or who deserves an opportunity, whether across all sports, whether it be hockey or baseball or whatever. I think Philadelphia sports fans, pay attention to the details and are invested in the team in a way that they're, not at the practices or shoot arounds or things like that, but they're watching the games and seeing who's performing. And I think, seeing that effort that Paul Reed brings is very Philadelphia and ignites the fans in a way that I don't think many players on the Sixers can do, as well as him being a young player who they developed, who's overachieving. I think all those things combine to make it so he deserves more opportunity. With that said, though, for me, DeAnthony Melton has to be the best free agent pickup that they made this offseason, particularly with his versatility on both ends of the floor. But the fact that he can come off the bench or start, he can shoot the three, and the defensive prowess is something I really enjoy watching. How much pleasure are you taking in seeing what DeAnthony Melton brings to this team, particularly here with Harden out? We're going to see a lot of him.
Yeah, he's a very enjoyable player to watch because he's doing many a thing, as the Mr. Do Something nickname indicates. But yeah, put on an excellent defensive showing against Devin Booker. Obviously wasn't the only one who saw minutes there, but I think it was yet another example of him conceding some height and some size. And that,
right, and he's not that big, man.
Not that big, but it didn't seem to matter very much. Uses the length exceptionally well. Just is a deflection machine, is dwarfing every other Sixer in that category. And I think just provides a consistent effort in tenacity that supplements all the natural defensive talents. And for both him and Matisse Thybulle now, it is interesting because I think it's a little more important to avoid foul trouble, and neither guy has been spotless on that front. I believe Melton picked up 4 early in the third quarter of that game. But if you're looking at the positive side of that, you do have 2 very high-level perimeter defenders there, and there's a little insurance. So, when Melton does get into the foul trouble, you have Thybulle, who is more than adequate to take on that assignment. And we have seen intriguing flashes of those 2 sharing the court, specifically with zone defense. We know that is something Thybulle has thrived in the past, going back to his college days. And honestly, I do like the Sixers turning to that semi-regularly just as a workaround. I think one little added benefit of that, too, is as Joel Embiid works through the conditioning, perhaps in the zone, he's able to be a little more just sitting back there in the paint and getting his wind a little bit, while the perimeter guys make it difficult to actually reach the paint. The Meltons and Thybulles of the world really just do rack up deflections and start fast breaks incredibly, incredibly well. So Melton has been a great addition thus far. I said it a while back. I think it's not outlandish to think he might be in that 6th man of the year conversation if he keeps this up. And of course, if the Sixers finish as a better than 500 team, as they and everyone hopes they will. But so far, so good. And the hope also here, of course, is that there's not too much on his plate offensively. He recently had a 4 for 18 shooting night and missed a potential hero shot against the Knicks. So certainly is a good 3-point shooter, is a versatile offensive player, but now Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris should undoubtedly be the 3 primary options for your offense, and DeAnthony Melton should be a complementary player, which he's shown he can do quite well.
Yeah, nothing like somebody who can glue it all together, and DeAnthony Melton filling the gaps there for the 76ers. You had some great video after practice before the Suns game of Joel Embiid running full court. I don't even think it was 5-on-5, but full court with TJ DeLeo and some of the other Sixers player development guys just to try to get his win back and whatnot. You're headed to practice here in a couple hours after the podcast is over. Do you anticipate some more of that with Embiid, running some extra full court stuff?
Probably contingent on how he's feeling, but I think they at least want that to be somewhat regular in his routine, and Embiid himself does as well. So he played, I think, 37 minutes against Phoenix, and as I said, they were high-level minutes, but he admitted after the game, like his body kind of shut down, and Doc Rivers said it was pretty spontaneous with how they substituted. It was just, Joel, tell us when you need to sit and tell us when you're ready to go back in.
Right.
And the first stint, I think, was only around 5 minutes, whereas before it had been, I think, typically 6 to 7. And then, of course, the ideal heading into the season was that Embiid could play entire quarters, and we're nowhere near that right now. So he's trying to grit through it. which is admirable. But obviously, as he does that, you don't want to push him too hard, either lungs-wise or, God forbid, recurrence of plantar fasciitis pain-wise. And that's always a tough balance for the Sixers with a very big physically player and just a very important player for them. But he is trying to take it upon himself to, behind the scenes, do what he can with the conditioning. I do think just that he's able to go 37 minutes in that game and that he's able to look like himself is encouraging. So he's not starting from scratch. He is not in a horrible place conditioning-wise, physically, but he has a long way to go. So, yeah, the Sixers have some former college Philly guys on their player development staff, and they are glad to help Joel Embiid out with those reps. Jason Love is often the guy who matches up with him, the former Xavier player, Philly native. So he is not Roy Hibbert, who actually was taller than Joel Embiid, but he is indeed quite big. I think Jason Love is 6'10", and at least gives Joel Embiid some of those game-like reps. But obviously the priority now, more than the skill, is just the wind and being able to play longer stretches and being able to do well when he is pushing himself beyond those 5 or 6 minute stints.
And they will have probably that same issue when Harden comes back, and him and his conditioning and lungs and whatnot. And Doc Rivers got into a little bit of that, jokingly saying if that was him, he would gain 10 pounds, sitting around not being able to run or, work out. But something they'll have to deal with when Harden comes back, regardless of whatever shape he was in before the foot injury. How he comes and shows up afterward is going to be a challenge, just to make sure they can maintain the status quo.
Exactly. I think there seems to be a recognition of that's going to be a process to get him back where he needs to be, but let's just hope it's not too bad and doesn't decline too steeply. That Rivers said that Harden has been away from the team and expects that to be the case for a couple more days here due to a family personal matter. And regardless, he was going to be off his feet anyway, just non-weight bearing is the standard. And that's kind of what you have to do to allow this injury to heal apparently, which is far from ideal. But they'll hope when he returns that he's at least been diligent about the diet and he's done what he can to be in a decent enough shape. Of course, when you get out of shape, you're more likely to pick up hamstring injuries and to have these minor tweaks as opposed to when you're in tip-top condition. So that's going to be a big storyline to watch with James Harden, and a lot of that will just be his personal responsibility, of course, with the Sixers monitoring him as closely as they can and doing whatever is possible to help him. But that will be a major storyline. But yeah, James Harden is not going to be in this picture for a while. So the Sixers are trying to do as well as they can while that is the case.
Yeah, he's in a walking boot, and another soft tissue injury with the tendon thing, just related back to the hamstring. But
I think mostly just bad luck there with someone stepping on his foot as he's trying to draw a foul. If you really want to be super harsh and say this is some sort of Harden specific injury, but I think just bad luck. And just James Harden. Okay, it happened. Now take care of your side of things and return in good condition. And that'll be scrutinized, of course, when he does indeed get back on the court.
The luck was not with Harden. Let's hope the luck is with the 76ers when they take on this dynamic backcourt of Trae Young and DeJounte Murray here over the next 2 games, a home and home with the Atlanta Hawks on tap. And I know sometimes saying the Atlanta Hawks around here is like a 4-letter word, depending on how much of your Sixers memory you like to tap into. But playoff losses, excruciating playoff losses aside, is a split in this home and home series the best the Sixers can hope for? Are you thinking that they can win both of these games, or would you go into it thinking you'd be satisfied with a split, i.e. like the Raptors or the Wizards?
I think a split in all likelihood would be a solid result. I do think as long as Joel Embiid is healthy and somewhat resembling himself, it's not outlandish to think the Sixers could win 2 games, even against a good opponent who's 7-3 thus far. And Atlanta will be on the second half of a back-to-back. The Sixers will have a significant rest advantage here. Atlanta playing the very surprising Utah Jazz tonight. So definitely want to win at least one of the 2. And I think 2 out of 2 would be quite satisfying, and it is not impossible. But obviously there are perimeter defensive challenges here, and you imagine a lot will be on Melton's plate, and perhaps if Thibault avoids foul trouble and knocks down an open jumper or 2, his minutes will bump up here as well to handle that Atlanta backcourt that you referenced.
Hey, this is the only podcast we are bringing you this week, partly due to the fact that some new horizons have arisen here for the Sixers Talk podcast and the family of podcasts here at NBC Sports Philadelphia. We will be coming to you live, a live podcast this upcoming Monday at Rivers Casino. And come check us out. If you're in the area, it's on Delaware Avenue. Live podcast on Monday from Rivers Casino. Sorry, I'm getting all choked up thinking about it. But be sure to check us out. And if I'm correct, Ben Berry, correct me if I'm wrong, but once a week we'll be at Rivers Casino. Is that correct? I think that's the interpretation I took from everything. So once a week, check us out in person. And Ben Berry is giving us the thumbs up once a week in the flesh. We'll be talking our talk. I am excited to be in person doing the podcast. Doing it over Zoom can have its challenges, or StreamYard or what have you. But digitally, it can have its challenges. But being able to, sit next to Noah Levick, and throw him in a headlock, every now and again when he says something I don't like. But no, I'm nonviolent, so take that for what it is. But it'll be fun to connect and chop it up in person, and get back to the way things used to be when we were first started doing this. But looking forward to that. So please come out and join us. Check out Noah Levick's work on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. A lot of great pieces on there. Oh, before we go, not only was Landry Shamet, former Sixer, in the house, but of course Dario Saric, the homie, a beloved former Sixer who so many people admire for his grit, determination, his basketball skill. Definitely not quite the same role with the Phoenix Suns that he had here with the 76ers, but you have an article on the website touching on Saric. Can you speak about that a little bit and just what your experience was, him holding court with the media after the Suns game and what he reflected on? Just a little teaser so that people can go to the website and check it out.
Sure thing. Yeah. So it was just, I just think 3 of us, were interested in speaking to him pregame, and he was nice enough to offer his time in the Suns locker room. I think the funniest part of it for me was he noted that the Wells Fargo Center has undergone renovations, so he knows the arena.
This place looks a lot better.
Yeah, I think it does look a little sharper and a little more spacious than his playing days. But he reflected on his time with the Sixers and the surprise he felt upon being traded in that Jimmy Butler deal, and also talked a little about how things are going for him in Phoenix, and just his gratitude to be healthy again. He only played 3 minutes in this game, but he is very glad to be back on the court after that ACL injury that everyone saw in the NBA Finals. And I think looked back fondly upon those Philly days. A little funny nugget there was, he said the person he's closest to from his Sixers days is Furkan Korkmaz, which I would not have predicted. But those two still have a close connection, he said.
Right.
But more on that, conversation with Saric, if you are so interested in an article that I published yesterday. Yep.
Yeah, we got time here between the Hawks game, so be sure to check it out. Grow your Sixers knowledge. Be in the know like Noah Levick. Check out his work on the website, and it's always fantastic and well thought out. So for Noah, I'm Danny. For Ben Berry, our producer, we appreciate you listening to the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works. Come out and see us in person next Monday, Rivers Casino. if you're not 18 and over, I think you need a parent or something like that. But nonetheless, come check us out.